Recently, I received a few emails from Kerala from people who have got their children or near relations working in Africa. All of them are worried about the outbreak of Ebola virus epidemic in Africa and the dangers it posed to their dear ones in Africa. Right information is always the right antidote for fear and anxiety. So I will share some scientific data I gathered from the World Health Organization records, Center for Disease Control in America, medical journals, and also from some of the very best infectious disease specialists in the field. Ebola virus was first discovered in 1976 near the Ebola River in the Republic of Congo, and hence its name. It's a deadly virus. Most viral infections, people recover from the illness, but in Ebola virus infections, most of the people die of it. World Health Organization has declared Ebola epidemic as an international public health emergency. First, few facts about viruses in general. Viruses are very small organisms living inside the cells of animals and plants. They are so small they cannot be seen by the regular microscope, only by the electron microscope. Current virology textbooks tell us that there are over 300,000 types of viruses living in the cells of animals in our plant. Most of these viruses are harmless when they live in the cells of their regular animal hosts. But if they get into the human body from the animal host, they can mutate and become very, very dangerous. The pandemic Spanish flu during the First World War in 1918 that infected 40% of the world population then and killed over 80 million people is an example of this. Swine flu, bird flu, and many other epidemics of the past. Man got the virus from animals like pigs, cattle, birds, monkeys, etc. Another example is in 1959, it was found out that AIDS virus got into man from monkeys in the sub-Saharan regions of Africa. Since the first discovery of AIDS virus in man, in the last 60 years, 70 million people got infected with AIDS virus, out of which 30 million people died. The Ebola virus also, in most probably, came to man from the monkeys near the African rainforests. In many parts of Africa, people hunt monkeys and eat monkey meat. The virus may have got from the blood of these monkeys to man through an accidental cut or a wound sustained during hunting or while preparing the monkey meat for cooking. The fruit bats in Africa are also considered to be an intermediary reservoir in the transmission of Ebola virus. Once man becomes infected with this virus, he can transmit the virus through his body fluids like saliva, sweat, tears, feces, urine, blood, or semen. According to the Center for Disease Control in America, the incubation period for Ebola virus fever is 2 to 21 days. If one does not develop Ebola virus disease within 21 days after exposure to the virus, he is very unlikely to get the disease. There is no medical cure for this disease at present. Only supportive care can be given to the patient, hoping that their body will somehow fight the disease and come out of it. Supportive care like giving fluids to correct dehydration, keeping the blood chemistry as normal as possible, and treating bacterial infections with antibiotic if and when it happens. And if these measures, intensive care measures, are started as soon as the fever starts, many more lives can be saved. The first two Americans, Dr. Ken Bandley and Evangelist Nancy, who acquired Ebola infection in Africa and returned to America, were treated in the Emory University Hospital by one of our own second-generation Malayali physicians in America, Dr. J. Basil Working. Both patients recovered. There is no vaccine available to prevent the disease now. So the big question is, will Ebola virus disease reach Kerala as it has already reached New Delhi? According to according to the Government of India records, there are about 45,000 Indian nationals living near the Ebola-affected areas in Africa. There is always a chance that someone with Ebola fever will one day land in Kerala also. So Kerala should take all precautions to prevent a disaster before it happens. The first thing is early detection of people with the disease by screening those coming from infected areas in Africa at our airports and seaports. All with fever should be isolated and relatives advised of the need of extreme precautions. A knowledgeable doctor and a nurse knowledgeable about Ebola fever and disease should be on duty at all our airports all the time. Contacts should be quarantined for 21 days at their own homes, and the public health department should closely monitor them. Ebola virus fever spreads only by contact with infected body fluids and not through air, water, food, or casual contacts. People should avoid travel to the epidemic infected areas in Africa if they can. When traveling in a plane anywhere in the world, we do not know who is sitting near us. So if possible, avoid body contact and wash our hands frequently, as we may have accidentally touched an infected surface. Imagine people come to know that 1 or 2 Ebola patients are admitted into one of our major hospitals, like medical college hospitals. Our whole healthcare system can be rocketed into uncharted waters and could cause panic and confusion. So in case we have to treat an Ebola patient, plans should be ready even now itself to treat them in few centers without mixing with the regular other patients. The greatest risk from Ebola virus disease is for doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers who are near them. In Africa, soon after the epidemic started, 324 doctors and several nurses died of Ebola fever, and a panic set in, and doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers abandoned the hospital and disappeared. An international effort was needed to restart some of these hospitals. The healthcare providers, few of them in our country also, in Kerala also, trained to treat these EVD patients. They should be provided with protective clothing, water-resistant gowns, special masks, gloves, and goggles for eyes. Whenever examining a patient with Ebola fever, all the healthcare workers, doctors and nurses, should not leave any part of the skin uncovered. In America, in spite of all the strict precautions, people got infected with Ebola virus. All of them were healthcare workers. I wish to conclude this depressing and somewhat discouraging story about Ebola epidemic with one encouraging and inspiring story. I have a good friend, Dr. James Sebastian Pullankulam, a gynecologist in Chicago. His son, Shevin Jacob, is an infectious disease specialist, and he is an assistant professor of infectious disease in Washington University. He is a recognized authority on AIDS and Ebola diseases and a consultant to World Health Organizations and American Center for Disease Control. His writings about these diseases appear in New England Journal of Medicine and Lancet. Jimmy showed me a letter from his son some time ago after the outbreak of Ebola epidemic in Africa. Shevin wrote to his parents that as an infectious disease specialist, the place where he is most needed in the world is West Africa. Jimmy and his wife Phyllis, who know the dangers of his son going to such an epidemic area, was naturally apprehensive. But Shevin convinced his parents why he should go to West Africa. The other day, Jimmy showed me another letter from his son from Liberia. In addition to telling his parents that he is safe and doing well in West Africa, he had sent a copy of a letter he received from one of his patients in Africa. The patient doctor wrote, "Dear doctor, I lost all my family and everything I possessed in life to Ebola virus fever. But I have got my life in my body because of you. God sent an Indian doctor all the way from America to Africa to save my life. I have nothing to offer you in return, but every day I promise I'll pray to God for you, and I will remember you." After reading this letter, I opted to make this episode in English instead of usual Malayalam to congratulate our American-born younger Malayali physicians like Shevin Jacob and J. Basil Workey and many, many others for their dedication and perseverance and achievement in the field of their choosing. This is Dr. Roy P. Thomas from Chicago. I'll see you again next week also, same time.